Welcome to Sputnik, orbiting the world with me, George Galloway.
And me, Gayatri.
He was the first and surely the finest mayor of London.
And he so dominated the London political scene before the mayoralty was created, Mrs. Thatcher had to abolish the pioneering Greater London Council to get rid of this turbulent priest.
Now, like me, he is an ex-member of Parliament and an ex-member of the Labour Party.
Not that he's giving up politics following his resignation from Labour. In fact, to paraphrase Mr. Ben, you could say he's given up his party membership to spend more time with his politics.
He is, of course, the one and only Ken Livingstone, and he joins us now. Ken, welcome.
Greetings.
To the show. Now, nobody wants to hear two grumpy old men talking about their ex-Labour Party career, but let's get that one out of the way first. How are you feeling personally in yourself? I was 36 years when in the party when I was expelled. You were even longer. It still hurts me. Does it hurt you?
No, because don't forget, I was expelled by Blair when I ran for mayor. So
this is the second time around, of course.
You've been here before.
Yes, but I mean, the thing is, this has dragged on for 2 years. I mean, literally, the police almost never take 2 years to solve a murder. But here's the Labour Party bureaucracy. I mean, all these actions, the same about, dozens of other people made 2 years ago, and still nothing's been done. And what really annoyed me was at the general election last year and the local elections this year, because of my suspension, I'm not allowed to campaign for Labour candidates. Yep. For the first time in nearly 50 years, I wasn't out there on the street. Now I can get back into campaigning, and I will.
I know you will. I wanted to talk to you about the Manchester events, because this is the anniversary. People are concentrating on the grief, the suffering, the awful heartbreak of it all. But nobody's talking about the political backdrop to it, because it comes, does it not, from Britain's illicit love affair with terrorists in Libya. No one talks about that. And Theresa May is right at the centre of that.
If you go back to that, it was during the Blair era. They wanted Gaddafi out, although we'd done deals with the Gaddafi because it's a big oil-producing nation. And no one had thought about what happens afterwards. And you've effectively had, ever since then, a civil war with a big chunk of Libya basically controlled by a terrorist organisation. And that's the consequence of overthrowing Gaddafi, just like the chaos that followed in Iraq when we invaded. I mean, I can't think of any time. I mean, I remember being taught history. We were planning to invade Afghanistan in about 1850. We've spent all our history invading other people's countries, not to make them better, but to get oil or some other benefit out of it. It's outrageous, and the legacy is a disaster.
You're right to say that the policy began earlier, and in fact it was Gordon Brown who lifted the control orders on the cell. It was a veritable cell, the Libyan Islamic Fighting Group. The clue was in the name. But it was Theresa May who gave them their passports back. And it was the British Security Service that allowed them, you could say pushed them, to go to Libya to fight Gaddafi. Now, neither of us is a fan of Gaddafi, but what happened next is surely worse.
A disaster. And also the scandal that came out last week about the then Labour Jack Straw, the Home Secretary, Blair, doing a deal that allows the CIA to kidnap people who've been opposing Gaddafi and take them back and torture them. And also, I didn't know anything about it. I mean, the complicity of some things we've been involved in. Normally, you have to wait 50 years for all this all comes out. And I just want to say, I want to see, Jack Straw and Tony Blair being grilled by some sort of inquiry about what they knew and what they were doing.
Yeah, we want to see him in The Hague, of course.
Well, they're still in the Labour Party, and maybe the Labour Party will interrogate them.
I mean, being involved in torture, that's not reason for expelling someone from the Labour Party.
No, it's not as if it's bringing the party into disrepute.
But you see,
We are paying the price for that foreign policy era, aren't we? In all kinds of places.
You see, if we look at the terrorism of modern times, I think the defining point is in July 1979. Jimmy Carter is president, and the CIA come to brief him in the White House, and they say, look, the Afghan government, it's pro-Russian, and they were pushing through some very good reforms, trying to give equal rights to women, proper education for all the kids, but there were, fundamentalist Muslim groups fighting them, particularly in the south of Afghanistan. And the CIA said, if we start giving them arms and support them, Russia will have to invade. It will become Russia's Vietnam. And that's exactly what happened. But I remember a Russian journalist saying to me towards the end of that war, once they've defeated us, they're going to come after you in the West. And that's exactly what happened. I mean, America mainly was pouring money into funding those groups that created a bedrock for terrorism, but the Saudis were funding bin Laden's group. And so when people say, what led to 9/11, I say, was that decision Jimmy Carter made?
I find it's not that I'm out of the Labour Party I find intolerable, it's the people that are in it, the people who led us into this. The fact that Peter Mandelson, Tony Blair, Alastair Campbell are not just in it, but are practically daily striding across television sets and news conferences and so on.
And making a lot of money from some of the dodgy deals they did.
Yes, yes. I mean, this is a paradox that you and I and Mark Wadsworth, we're all out, but Blair and Mandelson and so on are still in.
Mark Wadsworth, all he did was he saw a Labour MP doing something dodgy with the Daily Telegraph and criticised her.
Yeah.
And there's always this anti-Semitism. Well, no, it's not actually.
He didn't even know who she was, never mind what her religion was.
Expelled. But
unbelievable.
This is Jeremy
I think his case is the most unjust of them all. Yeah. At least we were high-profile targets. I mean, he's just an ordinary activist.
One of the problems, Jeremy's inherited a Labour Party in which all that bureaucracy was filled with people appointed by Blair. And that disciplinary unit, I mean, it's going to take a long time to get control of it because there's a very slow re-election of delegates that preside over it. And so there's this solid right-wing majority on that disciplinary panel. And they've spent decades expelling lefties. And they're going to carry on doing it.
Yeah, I of course I accept that. But as I pointed out in a piece I wrote on RT this week, the ultimate target is him.
Yeah, exactly.
So if he allows himself to be defanged, claw by claw, tooth by tooth, there's going to be nothing left to defend himself with. So I'm cross with him. You're obviously not.
Well, I'm
cross with him.
He's allowing parties to select the candidates they want now. It's a long struggle because he's got to change 20 years of the new Labour era. He is making progress, and he will fight on to the bitter end. He's just like you and me. When we were in Parliament, we were always rebelling on the same issues together. He always rebelled more than even you or me. I mean, he was out there number one. No, I was only number 6.
That was our mistake, Kerry. That could have been us.
Yes.
It could have been us.
And I think I would like somebody to do a documentary to go back and just look on all those rebellions of Jeremy. How many turned out to be true? Virtually all of them. He opposed war after war. He opposed tax increases on the poor.
Well, that's why you can't wait to get rid of him, right?
Yeah, precisely. Well, I mean, the establishment is terrified.
It is.
There could be a socialist in Downing Street, and they'll do everything to stop that.
True, but what they're doing is salami style, cutting away at his position. Let's talk about British politics for a minute. The government is all at sea, torn asunder. Brexit may well be their undoing. And yet they've just moved ahead, 4 points ahead, in the opinion polls. It's my view, if the Tories get back again, Britain will be broke. Not just broke, but broken. Scotland will take off. Even I could not oppose Scottish independence in the face of that. What's your gut feeling? Are the Tories going to get back? Can they be defeated?
No, because, I mean, if you look at the opinion polls before the last general election, they were predicting a Labour wipeout. We're going to lose 100 seats and all that. But the moment you hit the general election, it's not all these allegations that Jeremy was a terrorist supporter or working with a Czech spy and that. Because of the laws about equal coverage, and Jeremy will talk, and John McDonnell will, about the economic strategy, that really connected with people last time. They thought, here's someone saying austerity hasn't worked, we've got an alternative. And nothing good's going to happen in our economy. We are limping along. This is the worst period in our lifetime for the British economy. And negligible growth, people are getting worse off every year because of inflation. I mean, lots of new jobs have been created, but they're all low paid and insecure, no pensions. Absolutely. People are angry out there. And in exactly that anger fed the election of Trump. And that anger was what led to Jeremy getting, after 18 months of Labour MPs stabbing him in the back, he's still got the biggest increase in the Labour vote at any time since 1945. And we came within 2% of the Tories. So I reckon it's going to continue to be dirty lies and smears. But once you hit the election, that's when Jeremy really connects with people.
Definitely. He's a great campaigner, a great mass street campaigner. And as you say, the law makes the media at least a bit less unfair. So you're not one of those who thinks we've passed peak Corbyn.
No, I think...
I mean, he's a young man compared to you.
Yeah. He's about 6 years younger than me.
He'd be running as the youth candidate for the presidency of China.
Look, we've just had a Prime Minister elected who's 92, so Jeremy could be there for another 20 years.
Wow, look forward to that.
Maybe we'll get back by that time. Final question then. How are you going to spend your time? You already have the most beautiful garden in North London because for 2 years you've had nothing to do but tend it. Beyond North London in bloom, what have you got in mind for the future?
Well, I can now get back into campaigning on issues like climate change and also working for Labour candidates, because there'll be a lot of people selected in council seats and for parliamentary seats who are now allowed to have me turn up and support them. Up until I resigned from the Labour. While I was still in the Labour Party but suspended, I couldn't turn up and do
irony,
that.
Huh?
So I mean, literally every time there's an election, I've been all over the country supporting key people in marginal seats, like Naz Shah, which got me into trouble last time. And that's what I'm going to be doing. I also carry on looking after the garden.
Don't walk in front of any buses. There are so many of them, thanks to you. Ken Livingstone,
cheers.
All the best.
Thanks.
Coming up next, which bus do you take to Holby City? Answer your own.
Welcome back to Sputnik, a matinee idol on the BBC's super popular Holby City, treading the boards of the Royal Shakespeare Company. Our next guest is my kind of guy.
And not just because of his roles in Harry Potter either. My husband, you see, has a special love affair with buses.
And so does Guy Henry. So much so, he learned to drive them. He's parked the bus, so let's meet Holby City's Guy Henry. First of all, buses, because for at least 35 years, I have owned buses. I own one now, an open-top double-decker. I'm in love with buses.
That's what got me, you see, buses. So sexy.
I'm incredibly envious.
That's how I pulled my wife. I said, do you want to come for a ride on the bus?
It was. I'm very, very envious of you. How did you buy it?
I shop around for them.
Right.
You get them for a song, comparatively speaking. You dress them in vinyl. And you can be anything. You can promote your latest film, your latest part in the Royal Shakespeare Company, or you could just drive around in them. I just simply love them. Big stadium-sized speakers in all four corners. You can address the masses, as is my wont. I'm simply in love with buses. What's your story?
Well, only that I don't know why. I think it's slightly unsavoury, probably, isn't it? That I probably wanted to be in charge of something large and throbbing underneath me, and I did, from a very early age, I wanted to be a coach driver. And I got to 51, and I was still breathing. And thanks to Holby, I was able to pay for the course, and I took my PCV, passenger carrying vehicle licence.
Did you pass first time?
I certainly did.
Now, what bus got you to Holby City? How did you end up there? I mean, you're a Shakespeare man.
It's a good, it's a good question.
Is this your bit of rough?
It's, to be honest, a nicely paid bit of rough. I mean, I'm an elderly beanpole character actor, and I've had many years of being artistic, shouting in a wig at the RSC and other places. The dole queue. I mean, you know, as we all know, the unemployment rate in the theatre is 92%, I think. I've been very fortunate because the trick, I think, is to be odd. I've got very delightful, normal-looking friends, believe it or not, who are actors, and they don't work as much as I do because they're too normal. I'm very tall, very thin, very odd.
You're very, I'd say,
Yeah,
distinguished.
very distinguished.
I love you. Well, and also I have worked hard. When I went to drama school, I was an absolute laughingstock. I was completely useless, and I worked. I watched all the other people around me, and when I got out into the business, you watch the professional actors. You watch them like a hawk. Why does that work, what he's doing? So, I mean, I have worked hard, but I think I've gone off the point now. I was doing the artistic stuff and loving it, but by and large, relatively not, you know, well off. And then I went up for this interview for Holby City, and I did think, oh, I'm Guy Henry from the Royal Shouting Company. Do I really want to do this show? And I took the job, and they kindly offered it to me. And it was about 3 episodes in, and there was a beautifully written episode, which was about an Eastern European woman bringing her little boy over to this country for heart treatment. And it was very well written, beautifully acted by her and the little boy. And I suddenly thought, oh, don't be poncy about this. This is actually, at its best, a good show. 52 hours of television Holby does every year. That's like 26 feature films back to back. Wow. Obviously, a lot of it isn't the finest, but some of it is really good.
But do I understand that your character is a surgeon, right? And you obviously grow in it, but you went out in it and then back again in? And
yes,
how does that work?
Well, I'm, again, very fortunate because they let me off to do other things. I went and pretended to be, extraordinary job, very frightening job. I pretended to be one of my favourite actors, Peter Cushing, and they CGI'd
this is the amazing part,
my little thin face and made it his. It was amazing, terrifying, because I'm not a mimic. If it had been Peter O'Toole, I would have been fine. But it was Peter Cushing, who had a rather lovely, highfalutin voice. And
So you did his part, and then they put a CGI over you.
Yes, they flew me in a Virgin pod to LA, and I was twirled around in a special effects machine, so that every little twitch of my face, every bit of the acting was me, but they beautifully put Peter Cushing's face on top, because it was a tribute to him. Yeah. And the Rogue One film was an immediate precursor to the original Star Wars film. That's where it sits. And I think it was lovely of them to try to recreate this character.
And it really worked. You said Peter Cushing was one of your acting heroes, and I was going to ask you about that. I've just finished Irvin Welsh's latest, Dead Men's Trousers, which resurrects the Trainspotting crew, and I got to thinking about how you can't read the part of Begbie without thinking of Robert Carlyle, and then I got to thinking that Robert Carlyle conveys menace in a way that even De Niro can't match. And I got to thinking, there's an underrated and favourite of mine. Do you have favourites? I mean, do you look, or so-and-so's in that, I'm going to watch it because they're in it?
Yes, I do. People have always loved being told a story. That's what people sit in the dark, and they love being told a story. Theatre, cinema, telly. And what you want in an actor, I think, is you want to sort of believe, it's a suspension of disbelief, obviously, but you want to be engaged with them. You want them to tell the story. And I went to see a play, Absolute Hell, at the National last night. And the leading actor I love being surprised by somebody. Charlie Edwards is the actor, and I'd always thought he was a very good actor. Last night, he was astonishing. The facility with the words, the thoughts, the old cliche about it's as if he's making it up as he goes along. I sat there spellbound. I love that craft of storytelling. I believed him.
Now, Shakespeare, an acquired taste, some say. I absolutely hated Shakespeare at school and now find myself quoting Shakespeare regularly in speeches and articles and so on. But I guess a lot of people are lost to Shakespeare and therefore don't see you in the Royal Shouting Company because they look at the word Shakespeare and turn away. What can we do about that?
Not read it, I think. I mean, it's...
Just watch it.
Yes, but I mean, even that's dodgy, isn't it? Because I've done years at the Royal Shouting Company and only a few of the productions have been terrific. You try to get it right, you try to make it zing, and I played King John, which was...
Good King John.
Naughty King John. It was the nearest I could get to playing a king, because I'm not really Henry V after all. Actually, I got a couple of reviews that said, well, how clever. I was always fiddling with the crown, literally, because it didn't fit. It didn't fit me. So the reviewers kindly put that as a very clever decision I'd made to make the uneasy crown sit on my head. It just didn't fit. But I got good reviews because of that. But I think every time you do a play or any sort of show, you hope that it's going to be scintillating. You hope it's going to be a joy, and often it isn't. But I think that probably you did not like Shakespeare because obviously you were listening to it in a schoolroom, not done by turns face pullers like me. And I think it shouldn't be read, really. Not when you're young,
Very
anyway.
interesting point. Now, finally, Harry Potter. Had you any idea that Harry Potter would be the publishing sensation, not just of our era, but of any era, and that the movies would make fortunes and the careers of some, though not you, of the participants? In other words, did you know that you were in the presence of greatness?
I did the last two, so I think it was fairly well established by then. Talking about acting, it's very interesting that Richard Harris played Dumbledore originally. I remember him when I was a child, a teenager, when he was in Camelot, I used to sing along. I was rather a sad child, obviously. I wanted to be a coach driver, and I sang along to Richard Harris in my bedroom doing Camelot. But there's an example, if you like, of what I think wonderful acting is. And I don't know, you can't technically define it, and you certainly can't reproduce it. But there was one scene as Dumbledore where Harry Potter said, "Oh, I don't know how I'm going to cope with this." And Richard Harris said to little, lovely Daniel Radcliffe, he just put his hand on his chest and said, "Well, you will, Harry, because you've got something they haven't got." Put his hand on his chest and said, "Love, Harry, love." Well, I just sat there and went like that. A lesser actor would have just been a line. But for that strange, bumbling, extraordinary man, Richard Harris, it came out as love.
There's a parking warden at your bus.
Right.
So, alas, that has to be the final question. It's been a real pleasure meeting you,
You
Guy
too.
Henry. Thanks for coming on the Sputnik. And now it's your turn to tell us what you think through the portals of social media. What's rattling, Gayatri?
Well, when we announced that we would have the Ken Livingstone on the show, it brought up some very heartwarming messages, like long-distance runner who said, "Keep your chin up, Ken. Everyone with a brain knows that you were the victim of a smear campaign. Labour desperately needs rid of the overactive Israel lobby." And Christina...
He's hurting inside, couldn't you tell? He's really hurting inside.
Christina says, "I am sorry Ken Livingstone was treated so badly. Labour Party seems to be losing some of the best and retaining some of the worst. Ken Livingstone was targeted. I'd much rather have Ken Livingstone than the coup MPs. I hope Mr. Livingstone will remain active in politics. #witch hunt. And finally, a question from John McCormack, which perhaps you can answer. What would you say to proper socialist Labour voters in the lead up to the next elections, being that I don't actually think most current MPs, with a few exceptions, have any socialist DNA in their bodies? These people are chameleons with red ties.
Well, it would be beyond the scope of this program to advise people on how they should vote. But as to Ken Livingstone's future, maybe him and I will have to form a double act. Watch this space.
Okay then. Well, that's all the time we've got for today.
Which, alas, means that's the end of the show.
But you can stay in touch with us on our social media, on Twitter and Instagram, RT_Sputnik, or on Facebook, Sputnik on Russia Today. It's goodbye from me, Gayatri.
And from me, George Galloway. It's been marvellous.